friends, are you ready for today's story? Here's the book we're going to read. What do you see on the cover? I see children. But they're not dressed the way we dress, are they? No. This girl's wearing a bonnet and a very long dress with an apron on it. This girl is wearing a brown tattered dress, and she's not even wearing any shoes. You know what else I noticed? This girl is carrying a doll that looks a lot like this girl, and this girl's carrying a doll that looks like this girl. If I look over here, I see some grown-ups. There's a man. This man is not wearing the kind of clothes we are wearing, and he doesn't have shoes on, and this man has a funny hat on. Who are these people? This story is about a long time ago when our country was new. This story is about the Pilgrims and the Native Americans. And it's called The Very First Thanksgiving Day. It's written by, it looks like it's covered. Written by Rhonda Gowler Green and paintings by Susan Gaber. Ooh, these aren't just any artworks. These are paintings. How cool. This story is about the first Thanksgiving a long time ago. Look at that. That's a neighborhood. That does not look like our neighborhoods these days. This is what it looked like a long time ago. These are old-fashioned houses. This is the very first Thanksgiving Day. This is the food gathered and blessed, the corn and sweet berries, the wild turkey dressed, shared on the very first Thanksgiving Day. These are the Pilgrims, the people who came over here a long time ago. You notice what else they have? They have fish, rolls, cranberries. These are the Indians, skillful and strong, who knew how to live through the winter so long, and ate of the food gathered and blessed. The Native American Indians were here in America first. And explorers from over in Europe, that's way across the ocean, decided to come over and see what was here. And they wanted to live here. So they got on the boats and they came to America. But America didn't have lots of houses and stores and streets. Nope, it didn't. It had lots of woods and nowhere for them to live. The Native Americans lived here, but they lived in things like wigwams and teepees and huts. These are the Pilgrims who farmed the new land, who steadfastly labored and toiled by hand, and learned from the Indians, skillful and strong. They learned from the Indians. You see, when the Pilgrims came to America, they didn't know how to farm here. So they didn't know how to get food. And they were starving and getting very sick. But the Native American Indians, they knew how to work the land here. And they taught the Pilgrims how to do it. Look, he is showing her that if you dig a hole and you put the seed in, and then you put fish in there too, it will help the seed grow better. It's fertilizer, food for the seed. These are the houses built in straight rows that stood in the hot sun and harsh winter snows and sheltered the pilgrims who farmed the new lands. When the pilgrims got here, there were no houses. They had to cut down their own trees and build their own houses and make their own gardens. And they had to do that very quickly because once it got cold, they would have nowhere to live. See? Ugh, cold. This is the harbor marked by a huge stone where first steps were taken to chart the unknown, not far from the houses built in straight rows. Plymouth Rock is the place where they landed their ship. The pilgrims came over on a ship and they stopped at Plymouth Rock and they got out and they started a new life. This is not where they used to live. They came from houses and neighborhoods with streets and roads, got on a boat, and came to America where there was nothing but woods and open land, and they had to start from the very beginning. And this is the big ship they came over on, and that ship was called the Mayflower. This is the Mayflower ship in full sail that weathered the rough seas, the wind, and the hail, and docked at the harbor marked by a huge stone. That huge stone was Plymouth Rock. When they got here, the Native Americans, they already lived here. This is the ocean that never would end, that sometimes was foe, that means an enemy, and sometimes was friend, that carried the Mayflower ship in full sail. You see, they lived far across the ocean in a different part of the world. But they wanted to come to America, and a long time ago, there was no such thing as airplanes. To get here to America, they had to come by ship. But that meant that they had to stay on the ship for days and days and weeks and weeks. And the water could be rough and rocky and stormy, or calm and still. And the people on board, they sometimes got sick or hungry. And not everybody got to America alive. It was a very hard time. This is the land where it all began, the land where a brave group made ready their plan to travel the ocean that never would end, that sometimes was foe and sometimes was friend. They wanted to come here. They wanted to have freedom to do things. They carried the Mayflower ship in full sail that weathered the rough seas, the wind and the hail. This is a rough sea. When there's a storm, they had to be careful that their ship didn't capsize. When a ship capsizes, that means it tips over. And docked in the harbor, marked by a huge stone, where first steps were taken to chart the unknown. See, parents and children came. Not far from the houses built in straight rows that stood in the hot sun and harsh winter snows, and sheltered the pilgrims who farmed the new land, who steadfastly labored and toiled by hand. A lot of people came here and they were starving and got sick, or they froze because they didn't have the right kind of houses or food. The Native American Indians helped them and taught them, and learned from the Indians, skillful and strong, who knew how to live through the winter so long. How come the Native Americans knew how to live through the winters here? Because they were living here already. This was already their home. They knew what it was like to live in America. They knew what the weather was like. They knew what foods they needed to plant. They knew what they needed to do to get ready for the winter time. But the Pilgrims, they didn't know how to do that. And ate of the food gathered and blessed, the corn and sweet berries, the wild turkey dressed. Look at that really long table. This is a feast table. They're going to have a big feast. They're going to have a harvest feast. A harvest feast means at the end of the harvest season, when everything is done being picked, all the corn, all the apples, and all the crops that they planted, everything that they needed to pick before it got too cold and the frost got on it and ruined it. So they picked all the food and they're saving it for the long, long winters. But before they save it for the long winter, they have a big feast and they sit all together to have a big party. Do we have a big harvest feast like that? Does anybody have a harvest feast like that in November? I do. Now, I didn't pick my own food. I didn't pick my yams and my corn, and I didn't shoot my own turkey. Nope, I didn't do that. But I bought mine at the store, and I'm having a harvest feast. The farmers did all that for me, but I bought it, and I'm having a harvest feast. And that harvest feast is called Thanksgiving. Do you celebrate Thanksgiving? So a long time ago, after the Native American Indians helped the Pilgrims learn how to farm and get all their food, they sat together and had a big feast. And they thanked them. And that big harvest feast is what we like to call the first Thanksgiving. Shared on the very first Thanksgiving Day. Now, a long time ago, when they had their harvest feast, they didn't actually call that holiday Thanksgiving. It wasn't until many, 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 many years later that the people in our country said, hey, let's celebrate that time when we had our first harvest feast here in America. So they made the holiday called Thanksgiving. And we have Thanksgiving so that we can gather with the people we love. And we can talk about the things that we are thankful for and enjoy all the yummy food of the season as well. I hope you enjoyed our story, friends. Thanks for joining me. Bye now.